Good morning, everyone. This is Justin Roberti on RoxomTV. Welcome to Blockheadz. This week, we are talking again about Bitcoin. More specifically, kind of the ongoing question of whether Bitcoin can scale for global usage. I mean, at this point, it's toggled down to 5 to 7 transactions per second. How do you scale that into something that can serve all of the world's need for decentralized store and transfer of value? So that's what we're going to be digging into today. We've got lots of great interviews coming up. Specifically, we've got Spencer Yang, CEO of Fractal Bitcoin, about to come on. So I'm very much looking forward to talking to him. But as you already know, it's been a volatile April for Bitcoin. It dipped down to 74.5, 74,500. It's down minus 32% from January's all-time high before recovering to the mid 90,000 range by the month's end. Institutional interest in Bitcoin has remained strong, with major players like MSTR and Metaplanet accumulating significant BTC holdings. Altcoins struggled, on the other hand, and that's kind of what's been strange for a lot of us about this. So a lot of people got out of that bearish kind of feeling. A lot of people I'm talking to on my various shows got out of that bearish feeling when Bitcoin started to climb up. But the thing is, this doesn't seem to be a case where, a rising tide is necessarily raising all ships. Seems like we kind of moved toward practicality, technology, and practical use cases. So altcoins struggled. Ethereum is slightly down. However, Solana is up 16%. And Sui's up 52%, showing mixed performance. Also showing, as I was talking about in one of my spaces earlier this week, even with the Ethereum upgrade, they've got a problem in that Solana is just faster, cheaper, and doesn't value decentralization as much. This is a constant trade-off we're going to run into, folks, where you have people who are enthusiastic to have a better and cheaper user experience, but they aren't as dedicated to the core values of the space. And decentralization being really like first and foremost among them. Bitcoin's correlation to stocks fluctuated. They're always wondering if Bitcoin fluctuates with the rest of the stock market. Briefly decoupling. On-chain activity held steady, with TRX and Hyperliquid leading blockchain revenue, while Ethereum saw declining transaction fee share. Ethereum is going to make it a lot easier and going to be trying to make it simpler to do business on Ethereum. That's what their layest update is about, and we'll have to dedicate a show to that because it is a really cool subject. But for today, we're talking about Bitcoin scaling. I want to make it clear, especially since I'm going to be going into this show as kind of a devil's advocate, providing sort of the Bitcoin maxi point of view on a lot of things. I love Bitcoin. I do believe in other crypto as well, but we're taking a hard look here at whether it is possible, whether the Bitcoin maxi ideal is possible to apply. Is it possible to make Bitcoin the single decentralized store of wealth and transfer of wealth as it was originally set out to be, essentially? And then if we are really going to make it that, how do we address all the limitations? So I'm looking forward to getting Spencer up here. Let me go ahead and bring him up right now from Fractal Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and add Spencer. Hello, Spencer. Good morning. How are you?
Justin. Hey, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Fractal Bitcoin is doing very cool stuff in this space. Why don't you give us just a 1-minute elevator pitch about how Fractal Bitcoin plays in with the BTC network and with scaling?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show, Justin. It's an honor really to just share a little bit about Fractal and also what the ecosystem has been building very, very heads down over the past couple of months. But yeah, Fractal is really striving to be the innovation layer on Bitcoin to allow developers, users, and all kind of awesome applications to be built on the Bitcoin software and on a layer that can help Bitcoin to scale very, very effectively. So the first thing about Fractal is that when we designed the protocol and also the ecosystem, we really want to make sure that it complements Bitcoin without needing to change Bitcoin, and yet at the same time preserve all of the software compatibility, address formats, and a lot of the things that Bitcoin developers really need and love. So a Bitcoin developer can really integrate their applications to support Fractal within a matter of minutes, hours, instead
Right.
of days and weeks.
Yeah, no, that is great, and it's great work that you've been doing. A lot of, as I explained in my preamble to the audience, I'm going to kind of come at this today from the point of view of someone who has serious like Bitcoin maxi tendencies here. Not because I really necessarily feel that way. I do think that there is other crypto out there worth having. I think we could probably all agree that 90% of the coins out there right now will probably die off in the next 10 years or so. To be generous, 90%, because ultimately novel use cases and new technology is what's going to win out. But the question we're trying to explore here from a scientific point of view really is, how is it feasible, or is it feasible to make Bitcoin kind of the sole network for the storage and transfer of value? So with that in mind, let me go ahead and jump in about Fractal. Fractal Bitcoin is all about scaling Bitcoin without breaking what makes it special: security and decentralization. And that's what I really value about the project. I love that it has focus on decentralization. But for the diehard BTC purists, it sounds like a solution to a problem that some of them might argue doesn't exist. What do you say to the diehard Maxis who argue that Bitcoin doesn't need faster block times or smart contracts, that it just needs to stay true to its original mission, and that's what has made Bitcoin so far the strongest and most successful, as well as the first crypto project in the world?
Yeah, first of all, I'm a Bitcoiner as well, and I really like the whole ethos and a community that has been built around Bitcoin. One of the things that we have to understand is that the block space of Bitcoin is limited, right? And because the block space of Bitcoin is limited, and also so many developers and people and application folks want to actually launch things on the Bitcoin block space. As a result, you essentially have an auction problem, right? And I think
Right.
that's by design the basis of the protocol. So in essence, what we have saw from a data perspective is that a lot of people want to use the Bitcoin block space for various things. Some people want to put JPEGs on the Bitcoin block space. Some people want to send transactions to each other. And then some people want to also do some interesting applications, maybe privacy or other kind of interesting things that is made possible. So at the end of the day, our point of view is that we want to provide more ability for people to experiment and try new things using this block space. At the same time, reward the economics of it, because at the end of the day, the mining community and the miners are essentially receiving this transaction fee rewards so that they can continue to produce blocks in a sustainable way for the Bitcoin network. And I think we all agree that Bitcoin security is highly important, because without security, then the whole value of over trillions of dollars will
Right.
then be very, very compromised, right?
Right.
So in that sense, when we designed Fractal, and also when we thought about the use of Bitcoin block space, we are very optimistic there will be more and more. And we also observed that congestion can happen. And that's why solutions like Fractal that helps to ease congestion, but also at the same time to still continue to provide rewards to the miners and the security budget of Bitcoin. We think that that's the right approach to approaching it.
But isn't that what Ethereum is for? When you talk to me about DeFi and that sort of thing, if I'm going to take the hard line on this, Spencer, and that's the role I'm trying to play here, they're going to say, keep your staking off of my Bitcoin. I don't want to earn residuals on Bitcoin. I don't want to have ordinals. I don't like all these other use cases are distractions and also potentially a strain on the network. How do you address that?
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree that some people want to only use Bitcoin for sending transactions peer to peer. But I think it's also undeniable based on the activity that's been happening that at the end of the day, when you create a permissionless, and I think the beauty of Bitcoin is that it's permissionless, right? So when
Right.
you create an auction mechanism where it's permissionless, everyone has a right to be able to use the network in the intended way, as long as they have the ability to pay for the fees, and the fees, actually contribute to the network. And of course, the way that we think about it is that Bitcoin core software is actually valuable, and the Bitcoin script is valuable. So
Right.
for Fractal, and also I think where Bitcoin should be thinking about scaling, we shouldn't scale in the way that Ethereum does. we really want to have infrastructure that respects the base layer of Bitcoin while also giving users the experience that they can expect from some of these modern applications. I think that's really the goal. I don't think we're there yet, but that's really the goal that we're trying to strive towards.
But would Satoshi approve?
First of all, I think if Satoshi is out there, like huge respect and thank you so
Right.
much, right, for giving
Right.
us this, like for contributing to mankind, really. But of course, if Satoshi Nakamoto or the entities whatsoever do exist and they're still watching this space, and I do hope they are, then I would say that they should probably approve, right? There's actually a lot of changes that have been implemented since the publication of the white paper to the
Mhm.
forum post, right? I think a lot of people sometimes overstate the white paper and sometimes overstate the forum post by Satoshi, right? But overall, I think we kind of need to use a lot of the vision of Satoshi, including the forum posts as well as the white paper in totality. And I think overall, he's very encouraging. He or she or the entities are very encouraging of innovation overall on the protocol. And I think that's really awesome.
Sure. Yeah, well, I agree with that. I mean, and you believe that the system is meant to be changed and improved on. We're not still using the original Model T that was invented, even though we still use the combustible engine, for example. So hypothetically, this technology should continue to evolve and get better. Now you've got something really interesting going on. You've got this hybrid approach to mining, where essentially 2 out of 3 blocks are mined permissionlessly on your network, and the third is merged with Bitcoin. But aren't you risking creating a 2-tiered system where some blocks are more secure than others? How do you keep the whole thing safe without watering down Bitcoin's core security, which really is paramount, as you pointed out earlier?
Yeah. So to address the question of security, so how blocks are mined on Fractal essentially is on average 1/3, probabilistically speaking, 1/3 of blocks are mined via merge mining, and 2/3 via permissionless mining through both through SHA-256D, right? For merge mining right now, over 90% of Bitcoin's hash rates, like from mining pools such as Foundry, F2 pool, Ant pool, Binance pool, via BTC, and so on, are already mining Fractal. And that's really awesome, right? To see the majority, the super majority of Bitcoin hash rates merge mining on Fractal. And then the block rewards, of course, go to those merge miners. At the same time, we didn't want to only have merge mining because those are, I guess, incrementally, from a capital perspective and cost perspective, incrementally less than that of like permissionless miners who are essentially maybe using some inefficient miners or whatsoever to mine Fractal instead of Bitcoin. So I think over here, because it's a probabilistic model, if let's say, like to your point, one of these parties actually failed to produce blocks for whatever reason, let's say in a major catastrophe around the world and all of the miners supporting the network from permissionless mining goes offline, then the merge mining component will continue to produce blocks, and that creates very, very strong stability for the network. And I think that's really the intention to complement whatever Bitcoin miners are already receiving in terms of block rewards, but also having the mechanism to also have some cost so that they will feel the ability to be able to support the network going forward.
So when miners are experiencing macro pressures as they are right now, they've already got a supply chain problem that even pre-existed this whole tariff debacle, I would call it. This whole, it really hasn't done no good for trade relations worldwide, which is likely to exacerbate any sort of supply chain issues. And then we've also got rising energy issues. They're getting pinched from a lot of sides. Does that drive more miners to work with you?
That's a really interesting question. I think when it comes to the mining community, there's so many considerations that's important, right? First of all, I'm really happy to see super strong institutional adoption, like strategic reserves being set up for Bitcoin, right? And I think the global demand for Bitcoin rising and making it so important in world finance actually makes it a lot more reassuring for many of the miners who are investing multi-million dollars into mining. As of
Right.
today, the amount of energy that Bitcoin mining and proof of work uses essentially is 4 times the energy usage of Singapore a pretty
Mhm.
developed country in Asia, right?
Right.
And that is actually very significant.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, that needs to come with some level of rewards, right? And
Right.
stability. So I think with Fractal and Fractal's project of like providing some additional rewards on the proof of work side of things, it really helps to improve earnings and also rewards. We've also heard feedback that at different times, Fractal has actually helped contribute very significantly, like 10 to 30% of profits on a daily basis. And I think that's the work that we are trying to do. Of course, increasing the demand and also increasing the innovation on Bitcoin and Fractal together.
Right. Do you ever worry that the innovations that you're doing now to make Bitcoin faster, smarter, more scalable, these are all laudable goals? And of course, on Bitcoin, like I make no secret out of the fact that it really is my personal opinion, not playing games here, that the fortunes of the whole crypto and blockchain world right now are still rising and falling on Bitcoin. Anything going wrong with Bitcoin or Bitcoin hitting a wall where it can't operate to scale would essentially be disaster for the rest of the industry. It's the one crypto that everyone's familiar with. But I think that creates its own form of kind of trapping itself into a corner where people want Bitcoin itself to be immutable, to be have maintain the same simple purpose stated in the white paper, which I'm a fan of the white paper, and that's the only white paper I think I can really say that about, including the ones I've written. It's a good read though, folks, if you haven't read it. I love the decentralization, but by adding these other use cases in, if we're going to use smart contracts, for example, using ZK, bring them over to Bitcoin, it is exciting that we can do that. But should we do that? If we're going to do that, why don't we just put it on Ethereum? Why are we taking this? People kind of like Bitcoin as being the edifice that it is. What's the argument for making it change and evolve?
Yeah. I think for us, our point of view is that we really think that Bitcoin should be safe and secure, right? But safe and security also needs to come with some level of experimentation, right? And I think we want to essentially provide that outlet for developers, builders, and the users so that they will feel that they can essentially experiment and work on some of these things with real consequence on the
Right.
chain and network of real value. I think that's what Fractal could provide as a source. Of course, Fractal as a project and many other projects in the Bitcoin and crypto space can fail, but Bitcoin cannot fail, right? I think to
Right.
all of us here, we're very vested as an industry to see Bitcoin survive no matter what, right? No matter
Yeah.
what catastrophe. And I think if Fractal Bitcoin as a project and my team is able to contribute to the overall prosperousness of Bitcoin through some way of providing a network of real value for people to experiment and do awesome innovations on, that then maybe people can decide if they want to put on Bitcoin or not, then I think we've really accomplished in a very, very meaningful mission. On top of that, we also see a lot of people building interesting meta protocols and standards on Bitcoin block space, whether it's using the opcodes or whether using the blocks and so on. And I think those experiments can happen simultaneously on various networks. And these meta protocols can also be the interface and almost like the soft tissue between the muscle and the bones, which could be a lot of different networks in the world. And I think that's really the vision that we hope will be very interesting for people.
Absolutely. Do you think mainstreaming is here? Is this mainstreaming? We have the U.S. president talking about it. We've got El Salvador using it as a national currency. We're talking about a Bitcoin reserve. We haven't seen it yet. I'd love to actually see it. I'd love to see some clear regulation. But there have been a lot of very promising executive orders and letters published about it. And certainly people feel this administration is friendlier to Bitcoin and crypto in general than Gary Gensler was. Is mainstreaming here, or are we waiting for some other breakthrough usage? Do we have to have McDonald's accepting Bitcoin in order to call it mainstream?
Yeah, Bitcoin really feels like, like essentially, if you think about Bitcoin adoption and the problem of mainstreaming, it's almost like looking at the internet back in the day, right? When Amazon maybe first started, from the Amazon perspective or for the first user of Amazon, it's actually really incredible, right? You have institutions now buying Bitcoin and putting on a balance sheet. You have countries and presidents launching their own coins and talking about Bitcoin on almost like a weekly basis, daily, if not daily basis. So I think relative to what we were when we came into the industry, maybe 7, 10, I don't know, 5 years ago, right? Whatever number of time you have been in Bitcoin and crypto, you would find that we've been so much more mainstream than what it was before. But at the same time, there's still so much that we can achieve as an industry, and we really shouldn't cap our own growth and expectations of that. I totally agree with you that nations should be adopting Bitcoin. More public listed companies around the world, thousands in fact, should have Bitcoin in the balance sheet as almost like a default hedge and currency. So there's so much more to do. Ready?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm feel like we're coming back to sort of I'm coming back to the same question maybe one more time that I meant to, but like I don't want to beat a dead horse. But you know, high net worth people, institutions, people who have to long-term store value, have to store money, have already found Bitcoin to be useful. And then COVID seemed to make it more so. Russia attacking Ukraine, and then all of the embargoes that went along with that, of course, increases use case as well. Really, you know, we've been saying for over a decade now that global strife, really should be a good use case for Bitcoin. But do we run the risk, especially with high net worth individuals and with institutions which tend to be conservative, to say the least? Like, really, I think as they come more into our space, conservative beyond what Web3 people are going to be used to, and looking at it in looking at things in 5, 10, and 20-year windows, essentially, like that level of conservative. Are they looking for a vault? And, you know, like, are they really, or are they really looking for all this other sophisticated stuff? I've always wondered, I wondered about ordinals, doing an ordinal on Bitcoin just the equivalent to making like a gold foil Pokemon card? In other words, like it's kind of prestigious because of the medium that you're putting it in, but it just feels like a flex. Like, does it really help anything? And does it help Bitcoin? Or are we going to find, especially as we get these megalithic whales, is what I keep calling them, like whales in this, with ETFs, whales in the scale that we've never seen before. So like prehistorically large whales. When Credit Suisse is holding enough of Bitcoin to influence the price, like we're gonna have an interesting next few years, in my opinion. I'm not financial advice, folks, and that's not true about Credit Suisse. I was just throwing out an example. But anyway, when that happens, are we going to find that the majority of holders are like, no, I really just want it as a store of value. Why are you doing all this other goofy stuff with it? What do you think? Do you think that we'll be driven? Will we be driven by the involvement of those institutional players? Will have an outsized voice once they really buy in. I think a lot of people don't understand that BlackRock has not really bought in. $1 billion is not a lot to them. What do you think, Spencer?
100%. Those are really, really good examples, Justin. I feel like, as you painted those images in my mind, I was just imagining, I think the analogy that I would share is that Bitcoin is almost like a fire, right? It's a burning flame that you cannot contain with paper, right? I think trying to contain what Bitcoin can be, it's almost like trying to put Bitcoin in a box. And I would say we shouldn't try to put Bitcoin in a box. Bitcoin could be many things to many people at the same time. It can be a risk on asset. It can be a store of value. It can be a flight to safety. It can be an innovation layer. It can be so many things to different people. And I think that's actually what made Bitcoin resilient and makes it very, very valuable. Because in different situations, it can adapt depending on the use case. And because it's fundamentally backed by cryptography and really good economics and code and essentially coordination, that's what makes Bitcoin awesome. And I think that's the reason why we're all in Bitcoin. And even these debates, these controversies, and people's issues with each other, or these different tribes, this actually is what makes Bitcoin awesome. Like, what's a community without tribes, right? And what is a community without different opinions? So at the end of the day, I think the ability for us to be able to almost trust this protocol without needing to trust each other, I think is what makes Bitcoin awesome. And I really love the ecosystem here.
So real quick before we wrap it up, because I've got to get the panel on, I'm a couple of minutes behind. What are you excited about for 2025? What is your, big hope within the realm of the realistic for what we can accomplish this year in Web3?
Yeah, I think for 2025, my goals are very simple. I want to see way more 10x, 100x amount of on-chain transactions happening on Bitcoin that is very exciting, valuable, and diversified. I also
Okay.
want to see a lot more adoption, in the public markets, in the nation levels, right, among individuals around the world. I want us to hit 1 billion users for Bitcoin, not just 500 million. Let's just double that, right? Which is no big deal. Just 1/5 of the world population, right? That's my
Right.
goal for this year.
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe we can start a Bitcoin based analog to Pump.fun, and we'll start a meme coin revolution on Bitcoin. that
Everything
would
is
be a
possible
whole
on
thing.
Bitcoin. Everything is
Everything's
possible on Bitcoin.
possible, and if it's possible, someone will do it eventually. But thank you very much, Spencer. Thanks for coming on and talking to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care. I'm going to go ahead and take him off, and we're going to bring everybody else on. Let's go ahead and bring Mike up to the stage. Hello, Mike. Good to have you.
Thanks.
Just scroll down here. We got Ken. We got David. Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to today's show. So we are talking about scaling Bitcoin, and I was just talking to the CEO of Fractal Bitcoin. We've got Mike Carson, founder of Spaces Protocol. We've got Caden from Komodo platform, right? Do we have Caden? Actually, don't have Caden with us. All right. Thought he was coming. We got David Siroy from Alpin Labs, and Ken. You are with you're with Saros. You're the founder of Saros. Is that correct? Or Ken,
Yeah,
where are you coming from? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to introduce myself now.
Yeah, go ahead. Just tell us. Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself. Yep.
Hey guys. So my name is Ken. Currently, I'm leading the team of Saros. So for the context, Saros is building an AMM and also a DOMM on Solana. So right now we are in the contribution of the development space, and also right now I think that as you guys all see, is pumping right now, like not only Sol but like Bitcoin and everything. So I think we are in a really good position.
Are you feeling bullish? Are you feeling bullish because of Bitcoin? Because it's not bringing the altcoins up along with it. I was hoping for a meme coin super run this year, and it did not happen. Are you feeling?
Of course.
You think we're still in a bull cycle?
Yeah. So actually, I'm bullish all the time, and so actually,
right.
Even with the downs time, then we are still building, and we are still bullish for the market in general.
Definitely. Well, of course, we're all bullish about Bitcoin. I mean, I certainly am. I'm unabashedly a fan. I'm going to be asking questions like a little bit more of a maxi today than I really am. I actually do support other coins, but we're trying to examine how feasible is it to make Bitcoin, the single network solution to support the global store and transfer of value as was originally laid out in the white paper. So let me go over to David. I've got this network, David. It can process 7 to 10 transactions per second. I want to go ahead and make it a globally used network that used by billions of people. How am I doing?
You're saying, how do you do it?
No, I'm saying if I came to you with the idea of having a network that does 7 to 10 transactions per second, and I want to make it globally feasible to be used by billions of people, on its face, doesn't that seem like a non-trivial challenge from an implementation point of view?
Yeah, I mean, scaling has been a known issue in Bitcoin since the inception. You can go back to the earliest forum posts from when Satoshi first, posted it online, and people said, "Hey, this thing will never scale." And those conversations heated up even in the early days of 2011 to 2013. But now I really do think with I'm talking my own book here, with the advent of zero knowledge proofs, we actually have a credible path to build these very trust minimized, dang near trustless layers that can add not only functionality but scale to Bitcoin. There's a diverse set of scaling solutions in Bitcoin, but I would challenge that many of them have very suspect trust trade-offs.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk a little bit about decentralization here, but why don't you explain to the viewers here what the what the goal of being trustless is, or I should say what the advantage of it is, because I don't think that it's honestly fully appreciated. I think it's one of those buzzwords that, I mean, it was being used a lot, like during the ICOs and stuff, but less so. Like, I think that even people within the space don't fully appreciate what it means.
There's a quote from Satoshi, I'm paraphrasing here, something along the lines of like, the problem with traditional currencies is all the trust required for them to function. Like historically over thousands of years, we've essentially given our money to some sort of counterparty, whether it's a person or a bank or an intermediary, and we have relied on them to facilitate things that we demand, to facilitate commerce or transferability or expansion of credit. Like you are essentially giving up your custody or some amount of trust to that intermediary. And historically, that power has just been far too great for humanity, and they've abused that privilege. They've created fractional reserve of money, or censored your money, or stolen your funds. And so when we talk about trustless, it's kind of removing those centralized intermediaries and preventing them from taking over your property. I mean, it's a fundamental human rights and property issue, in addition to being a monetary one.
Right. So in that respect, you think it's a direct reaction to traditional finance in a lot of ways, where certainly there have been many provable instances, but certainly the accepted point of view is that the big money people, of course, are constantly in the position of screwing over everybody beneath them, and that it is not a level playing field, whereas Bitcoin is looking to present more of a level playing field. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious example is like, Bitcoin is 21 million coins. Like, you don't have to trust somebody that it's a fixed supply. You can go out and verify it. And that's an example of when you give up, custody or trust or control of your money, they're just going to, artificially create or inflate the monetary supply. And so that's kind of why we lead with that narrative of Bitcoin is fixed supply. Like that's the most, visceral, obvious example. But there are other examples, where this becomes an issue when people can censor or steal your funds. But definitely the main one is, hey, like they're taking our money and, artificially pumping it. So causing inflation.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Let me go over to Mike from Spaces Protocol. Mike, great to have you on the show. So let's talk for a second about Lightning Network. It's sort of the most popular, the most prominent L2 scaling solution for Bitcoin, but it relies on user-managed channels and has routing complexities. Is it really in the position to provide global scalability? What are the limitations around Lightning Network and really around the L2s in general that we're kind of dealing with right now to get a practical view of the Bitcoin ecosystem's overall ability to scale?
Yeah, I mean, all of these things are a work in progress, but I mean, I think it does come down to the point that like you have to scale off chain because it's just not practical to do it on chain. And so Lightning is a great example of doing that. And yeah, there's some issues, but it works now in a lot of ways. And, developers are working on it. So I think these things will be solved. It's just like a work in progress, but it's something that, I mean, what it comes down to really is you have to scale off chain, but relying on the trust anchor in Bitcoin. Jameson Lopp has this great article on Bitcoin as a trust anchor. And Bitcoin has this, it's the strongest by far proof of work blockchain, like the most secure and strongest proof of work blockchain. And so using it as a trust anchor to branch out and do other things with it, I think is really important and is a great use case. And so these things like Lightning and stuff, I think will scale to, billions of users. But it's in development right now, and it's going to take some time, and you got to make sure to do it in a decentralized way, in a secure way. So it's not something, it's not like Ethereum or other things where you build fast and break things. It's, make sure you do it in a smart way, but it will happen eventually, I think.
It's funny you talk about Ethereum in that point of view. I was talking to Ethereum on Wednesday. I was talking to somebody from the ETH Foundation. And I was thinking to myself, man, compared to most projects, like they're a very serious group of guys. There's a lot of stuff going on over there, but and they seem when compared, like they're having a problem where compared to Sol, for example, Sol's able to come in with less caring about decentralization and essentially just crank out a better UX and a faster, cheaper experience. And so Ethereum has lost some ground to Sol because of that, even though I would take them to be more purist. But like Bitcoin is upholding an even faster, is an even greater standard, which kind of leads me to my next question, which is, are we, and I'll stay with you for this one, Mike. Are we making a mistake by Bitcoin was a stroke of genius. It's a decentralized, censorship-resistant, independent of state, a store of value built on an indelible ledger. Why is everyone eager to turn it into something else? Aren't ordinals, DeFi, smart contracts just distractions from Satoshi's original vision?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people, I consider myself a Bitcoin maxi, but I like the way that I see it is Satoshi created the great invention of Satoshi. Bitcoin is awesome, but really it's this decentralized ledger. It's this decentralized database that's backed by proof of work that is completely decentralized and that people can store data and they don't have to trust anybody. And so in my view, the first killer app for that was Bitcoin. Money was the first killer app built on this decentralized ledger. But there's other things, like there's other use cases. Like, for example, what we're doing with Spaces protocol is decentralized naming. Like domain names and usernames, identities are digital. They're digital assets. And they need to be, there's an urgent need for them to be on a blockchain. And there's no better place than to anchor it in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the strongest and most secure proof of work blockchain. So I don't think it's a mistake to branch out and I think of it like, I was thinking about this before the show. It's like, Satoshi wanted to create this is just an example, an analogy, but like, let's say Satoshi wanted to create this amazing Excel app, but he had to create DOS first, And so DOS is like the ledger. And it's like, to say that DOS can only be used to run Excel, like there's so many other things that can be used. Like it was a stroke of genius. Like the blockchain is an incredible invention, an amazing invention, but to limit it to, I think there's compelling ways, and it's not going to hurt. To me, it's not going to hurt the money case, because it's actually going to, like, there's the fee issue. It's like, once the mining rewards, the block rewards go down, like how are the miners going to get paid? How's the network going to be secured? And I think it's through transaction fees. And in order to have transaction fees high enough to pay and secure the network, you're going to need other applications on there. So in my view, it's like it's not only something that is not harmful, I think it's helpful.
All right, that's great. I can certainly see the use case for that. Honestly, anything that seems to increase the meta or the mind share around a project tends to add value to that project. I personally tend to think that more attention brought to the Bitcoin network for whatever reason is going to increase BTC. But I'm going to go over to back over to Ken. Ken, to speak to something that David said a couple of minutes ago. There was a strict 21 million supply limit, ensuring scarcity and preservation. But with all these new BTC derivatives, wrap tokens, aren't we potentially diluting the scarcity? If Bitcoin becomes just another DeFi token, does it lose what made it special in the first place? Which certainly, part of the strength is a singularity of purpose.
Yeah. So actually, first of all, I think that I was invited here to ask some kind of controversy to the conversation, because actually I'm a Solana maxi, and also I'm building products on Solana. So I may be biased on this, but actually, when it comes down to whether it is necessary to scale up Bitcoin, then we will have to sometimes answer the question like, are we considering Bitcoin as a way for mass adoption, or will we consider Bitcoin as as a store value kind of thing? Because if we are to observing the current state of crypto and also Bitcoin in specific, so I think that most of the users, the traders, and most of the mass adoption kind of thing, they're all thinking about Bitcoin as a store of value. So whether it is to scale it to layer 2, or we are adding ordinals to it, I think that it can potentially devalue the current state of Bitcoin, because for mass adoption we have other chains where the doing things with it. For example, Solana, Ethereum, and also in terms of Ethereum, for example, we try to scale it because the fees are too high, and the original chain is with the gas fees and the slow tendency and everything. And then we see a bunch of layer 2s on Ethereum, and I think that the layer 2s are necessary for Ethereum, but it doesn't really add much value to the existing problem with the Ethereum. In this case, I think that it will apply the same with Bitcoin, because basically, like, if we are to add layer 2s, or but ordinals is a different thing, because I love NFTs and everything, so that could be a good case. But like for me, I think that scaling Bitcoin can be, I don't know how to say this, because you guys are building scaling options on Bitcoin. So, but like I think that sometimes is not that necessary for the scaling of Bitcoin.
I'd really like to challenge.
What's that?
I'd love to challenge that.
Okay, go ahead, David. Yeah. Challenge that.
I think that's wildly incorrect now with the advent of zero knowledge proofs. Anything that can be done on Solana can now actually be brought, trustlessly to Bitcoin with ZK rollups. But anything on Bitcoin cannot be brought to Solana. And at the end of the day, the only thing that actually accrues value in this entire industry is monetary premium. Like any value that Solana ecosystem extracts is really as a byproduct of them, rent seeking through, what they call REV or MEV or fees. Over time, that compresses, all the value flows into monetary premium, which is the store of value, which is Bitcoin. If we can actually add the functionality to Bitcoin in these scalable L2s, you could have a world where you could have the Bitcoin layer 1 anchored. You have zero knowledge proofs to an SVM, which uses Solana's exact tech, to the EVM, to Cairo used by Starkware. You can have interop amongst all of these, like these days of saying that Bitcoin's dead, oh, it lacks the functionality, like we have these other ecosystems, is wildly incorrect. And I understand that may be a contentious take, but it's really just because most of the mass market doesn't really understand what's happening on the technical side behind the scenes.
Okay, so what is the role of Bitcoin? I mean, first of all, to play the other side for a second here, people are going to do every use case that they can come up with anyway, David. And they're going, if somebody's going to do it on the BTC network, if at all possible, probably this year, in fact. So how do you define Bitcoin's role? Are we really talking about like a strictly one-chain future, or is it a matter of having Bitcoin just directly address like what has been Bitcoin's foundational purpose, which is to be, at this point, it's like, I think right now it's already sitting at something like 60% of all the value in all crypto is in Bitcoin. I mean, it might even be a little bit higher than that. I know I just read this very recently. So it is kind of the foundation of the rest of the space. How do you define Bitcoin's role relative to these other networks?
I'm saying that we now have the technology to make Bitcoin a radically unopinionated stack. Okay. Where if you want to be the monetary maximalist, you can. If you want to be the NFT god, you can. If you want to be CBDC king, you can. And all of those can anchor to Bitcoin's trust with unlimited expressivity and with scale. I personally am a monetary maximalist. I think Bitcoin's primary role is money. I think our entire industry is predicated on the use case of money. Is blockchains is used for money. So that's where I personally stand. But I'm saying you don't have to. And there is not a use case that Bitcoin will not be able to go after that Solana and Ethereum and others can. That was a valid criticism years ago. It's not becoming a valid criticism anymore.
Ken, I want to give you the opportunity to respond. I mean, I'm not really following Robert's rules here, but just trying to be fair. If you have a short response, feel free to give it, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for the case of Ethereum or Solana, I totally understand that, for Bitcoin, then, we totally can do like all of those things on other chains, which can be applied to Bitcoin and everything. But just a bit curious, like, for example, we have, all of those things with DeFi, with NFTs and all of those applications on Solana or like Ethereum or like any other layer 1, layer 2s. So is it necessary to bring it onto Bitcoin? Like, because, as if we have already have those kinds of application, all of those use case in other chains, then do we really need to move them into Bitcoin?
All right. So, well, you ended with a question there, David. You got a quick answer, and then we'll move on.
Sure. You technically don't need to, and maybe you're right. Maybe the existing network effect will stay on those chains. But I would argue Bitcoin has the biggest network effect. It's 60% of the entire industry. There's trillions of dollars. So what do you want to be on? Do you want to be closer to the existing network effect of NFTs on Solana, or do you want to be next to the network effect of trillions of dollars? So my thesis is all of that will move towards Bitcoin and not vice versa.
All right, fair enough. And I will also point out, just from my point of view, Ken, that somebody's going to, and that. I've always had the feeling when you look at use cases like Ordinals, for example, like I said to Spencer when I was just interviewing him, I feel like it's making like a gold leaf, gold foil Pokemon card. You're like, it's the same thing, but it's fancy. You're putting on the Bitcoin network. That's fancy. And so people are going to do it regardless. But let me go ahead and take a ZK question over to David, because he's the guy for that. So ZK proofs, really tearing up the industry, really impressive, and now getting some use cases outside of Web3, which is not something I prepared to really talk about today, but that it's cool to see that that's happening. But do they really need? Does ZK technology really need to be bringing smart contracts to Bitcoin? Isn't that what Ethereum is for? Why I've heard through the grapevine that these smart contracts tend to add a little bit of bloat and a little bit of vulnerabilities to the chain. That they haven't. We've had a hard time locking them down up till now. Don't we put our beloved network at risk by adding that kind of functionality? What's your take on that, David?
Well, to be clear, to add to allow Bitcoin to reason about zero knowledge proofs, we used to think that we needed a soft fork. We do not need any sort of soft fork, any sort of change to Bitcoin whatsoever, and that's a profound breakthrough because it's kind of like historically Bitcoin's like don't change, all this stuff is very scary. It's like, well, okay, we can just do it anyways right now, so don't worry about it. You don't need to change anything. Further, like ZK is both what I would call like a translation tool and a compression tool. So a translation tool in the sense where we could add this kind of programmability off chain. We talked about the Solana VM, the EVM, any sort of programming language that you want. And you could do smart contracts and everything that don't ever even touch Bitcoin. And then you can throw those into a zero knowledge proof, which compresses them. It takes any giant amount of arbitrary computation, any type of Solana type thing you want to do, compresses it into a very succinct zero knowledge proof, into one single common language that Bitcoin can understand. So imagine you're just giving Bitcoin a single word. It says, oh, I understand what that word means. I have no idea how it was compressed and everything above that, but I can understand that. That is like magical and something that for many years we didn't even think is possible. So to recap, Justin, like to answer your question, we can add the programmability, we can add the smart contracts, and we can do it in a way where we're not changing Bitcoin, which doesn't scare people. And that is just like, it's just an easy win.
If I could I add a little bit to that? If I don't,
please.
So we're using ZK proofs for Spaces protocol too, and the reason is it's like to scale to billions of names and billions of usernames and stuff like that. It's the most efficient way to do it. But as to your question about why not just use Ethereum or Solana or something like that. Well, the reason we chose Bitcoin is because Bitcoin is by far the strongest, most secure proof of work blockchain out there. It's decentralized. And that's to me, that's the whole point. Like the cypherpunk ideal, the whole point of blockchain is like decentralization. So when you go to Ethereum, it's hard to use Ethereum without using a centralized service. I don't see how. It's like almost impossible. You have to use Infura or something like that. Like And also that goes for other, like Solana, as far as I know, it goes for other things too. So it's like, to me, it's, you know, when it starts becoming more centralized, when you use another blockchain that's centralized, it loses a lot of value to me, and it's a lot less interesting. So why not? If you're really going for the decentralized aspect, which is like the whole point basically of blockchain to me, then why would you use anything else except Bitcoin if you can? You're
Justin,
on
you're
mute.
on mute.
You're on mute.
Justin, you're on mute.
Sorry. That's a great question. You know, Starknet wants to add programmable smart contracts to Bitcoin, which opens the way for a DeFi, of course. But if you're using ZK proofs, Ethereum bridges, complex rollups just to make Bitcoin usable in this way, at that point, is it a Bitcoin solution or is it a Bitcoin branded solution? I mean, it does have the strongest brand in the industry as well. So I can see why projects like also seriously want to involve the brand. But when it has to use other third-party services in order to make something happen, that's at least 3 other entities involved. What do you think, Mike?
I mean, for us, when we designed Spaces Protocol, it was all about the decentralization. It was about the most secure blockchain. I mean, we looked at other projects that used their own blockchains, or they were built on Ethereum and other things like that, and they just weren't. It's not as decentralized. So for us, it wasn't really a branding. I mean, that's a nice benefit that comes with it, is the ecosystem. But for us, it was, what's the strongest and most secure blockchain, the most decentralized? I mean, that's the whole point, is decentralization. Right. So like, what's the strongest, and why would you put it anywhere else? Like, if you have your own blockchain or something like that, it's going to be way less decentralized. It's going to be way less secure. So why would you put it anywhere else except Bitcoin? That goes back to Jameson Lopp's article about Bitcoin as a trust anchor. It's like, why would you anchor your project in anything else? And ZK proofs and stuff, they don't make it. It makes it really efficient. Like, you can scale to billions of, like for us, billions of names, and it's like super efficient to do the lookups, and it's very minimal storing data on Bitcoin, like very small. Like, you just have to store the proof on Bitcoin. So it's yeah, I don't see why anybody would use another blockchain person.
You think it's just a matter of using it strategically, essentially, when you talk about it being kind of like a central anchor, because obviously not all the processing power can be just on that chain. I don't think it would be able to handle billions of users at any given time, obviously. But so you're okay with other things that extend that, kind of like the same way that lots of projects are using the Ethereum virtual machine, to run their smart contracts. So that's their point of reference there. You're suggesting in a way that Bitcoin is in kind of a similar position as like the center of the hub that all the spokes come out of.
Yeah, Bitcoin is that trust anchor. Bitcoin as the trust anchor. I mean, it's similar to Lightning. Like, you anchor the transactions, but then the transactions are done off chain and stuff. But it's still decentralized and secure. I mean, that's the same way we're doing it with Spaces. Is like, we're anchoring it in Bitcoin so that the trust comes from Bitcoin, which can't be. It's like it would be impossible to. It's super secure and decentralized and trust, and you can trust what's there. And then from there, you can do other things like you can do the proof, like basically you can do the zero knowledge proofs, which makes it really easy to look up, names and verify names and keys and stuff like that with just a single proof, single hash that's anchored in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I definitely think that one problem, and I'm going to go back over to Ken, one problem that we've had in this space, this is just my opinion at this point, is getting people to focus on decentralization. Like, as soon as people are making money, they're ready to walk away from it. They don't care if it's a better experience, if it's cheaper, but in the meantime, in order to scale up Bitcoin, we're already involving other L2s and custodial solutions. Aren't we just putting our toes back into we have centralized points. Like Bitcoin can stay decentralized, but if Bitcoin is working with L2s that are more centralized, we're not keeping the system perfect, Ken. Don't we kind of end up in the same place? It seems like you're a big Sol proponent, and I'm not picking on Sol right here. I was just talking to Ethereum earlier in the week, so I was going over that stuff. But you could take the point of view of like, well, maybe this ideal, when applied too strictly, just inhibits innovation, and that ultimately we're going to have a mixed system that incorporates both sides. What's your take on it, Ken?
Yeah, so actually, like, this is my personal opinion. So, like, the majority of traders, users, and even builders in the space is, when we initially come to the space, then we are in it for money, right? So, actually, like, for the chains like Solana, Ethereum, and many others, then I think that it will eventually comes down to neutralization. Like, everything will be kind of the same and everything. So for that time, then I think that eventually Bitcoin will be again be like the main character here with all the scalings, as David mentioned here. Like I think that eventually it will become the one that everyone will be focusing on, especially when scaling, because when times comes, then every other chain is going to be neutralized, and it will be time for Bitcoin to shine. But just that, the question is when, because I think that for the meantime, then the spotlight of application use case and everything will be on the other chains like Bitcoin. But like the time will come, but I just don't know when.
Okay, let's talk about programmable tokens. Now, I'm going to go back over to David. They're saying that programmable tokens can unlock 2 trillion in dormant value, but isn't that just a polite way of saying, we're desperate to get Bitcoiners to stop hodling all the time? But yet, hodling is a fundamental part of the community and a fundamental part of Bitcoin's value proposition. Now, how do you think that will change things? We have programmable tokens. Are we going to get people to start to actually move some of that Bitcoin and not just use it as a store of value?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're already seeing the Overton window shift on that quite a bit. Even my most maximalist of maximalist purist friends, which I have quite a few of them, they don't want to sell their Bitcoin. If they're being a good Bitcoiner, they want to borrow against it. Well, currently you could do that, off-chain in TradFi solutions. You're paying, 12, 15, sometimes upwards of like 20% with crazy fees. We're seeing on-chain protocols like, Morpho or, Bitcoin-backed borrowing on-chain protocols, and they're like, 4, 5, 6% right now with no rehypothecation, with no fractional reserve, with like out the friction. And so I think despite a lot of the frankly junk that exists in our broader ecosystem that has really like tarnished a lot of our industry, there is a small niche of use cases that are genuinely better on chain when they can be programmed than they are off chain. And I think people are starting to wake up to that. When you can actually provide a better product that can stand on its own 2 feet without any sort of like ephemeral token rewards or point schemes or like, random stuff, you're just like, wow, this is just straight up better. Yeah, I don't even think we need to market it. Like, it will just kind of happen. And you're starting to see early signs of that. So yes, programmability to Bitcoin is extremely valuable. With that, I just want to say thank you. I do have to drop a little bit early.
Oh, okay, right.
Justin.
Yeah, I know you had to go, David. Well, thank you for joining this subject. It was very cool. Good talking to you. So we'll keep talking to Mike and Ken for a few more questions. There's more here to cover. Let's go to Mike and Fediments. There, you've got a community-based custody protocol, great for close-knit groups. But is it really what we would call trustless? Is it Bitcoin if I have to count on trust a bunch of friends and family to store my Bitcoin at that point? Is it still Bitcoin? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to me that is, the less decentralized it is, the less interesting it is to me. So I mean, I'm more interested in like pure Bitcoin, which is completely decentralized. But I mean, I also see the need for these other things. I don't think that there's a problem. I mean, you know, it's like, for example, exchanges, you have to, it's like people, even Bitcoin maxis have to use exchanges sometimes to buy Bitcoin. Like Andreas Antonopoulos has a good analogy. He's like, an exchange is like a public restroom, just like go in, do your business, and come out as fast as you can. Like, I think that's a good analogy. So, I mean, I think all these things are, I think it's fine, and there's use cases for them and stuff. So to me, I think the more decentralized you can make things, the better. But if it's not possible and then there's use cases for it, I see that it could have value.
Definitely. Ken, what do you think? Bitcoin OS, I know we talked about smart contracts a little bit before, but it claims they could bring smart contracts directly to the BTC mainnet using ZK proofs, but verifying those proofs can be slow, it can be expensive, it can be complex. Are we turning our elegant, simple bit of majestic engineering that is the Bitcoin network into a Rube Goldberg machine by putting all these other solutions on it? What's the tipping point from your point of view?
Yeah, so I think that eventually there will be some kind of layer twos that will meet the demands and also do their jobs really good, because taking other chains for example, right? So we have many layer twos of Ethereum, of Solana, and other layer two layer one as well. But like for example, for Base, right? So they are doing a really good job as a layer two for Ethereum. But like there are also other layer twos for Ethereum, right? So but they are not doing as good as Base. So I think for Bitcoin it will be the same case. Like if we were to actually accelerate the scaling solution for Bitcoin, then there will be many competitors in that space, and eventually there will be a good one who will come at last. Yeah.
Mike, do you think that this is a year for, as people have been saying, we started out 2 months ago, it seemed like everyone was pretty convinced we're going into a bear market, and that was the atmosphere that people I was talking to. In the past few weeks, people are feeling much better ever since Bitcoin hit 90 something, right? And so they're ready to declare a bull market again. Do you think that we are still in the kind of high stress market that's going to expose more of what we are, expose the core technology, expose the real use cases? And if so, do you think that Bitcoin is going to become more centered in the crypto world than it even is now? Is that the kind of future that you're looking for?
You broke up a little bit there, but I think I mean, I'll try to answer, but if I miss something, let me know. But I think, I mean, from my perspective, like, I think Bitcoin, it's hard. It was the first. It's it's the most secure. It's the most secure, strongest proof of work blockchain. So to me, and I think the market shows its value, like it's hugely dominant. So I think it's like, I'm not saying that there aren't use cases for other blockchains or anything like that, but I think it's really on them to prove that it's necessary to have a separate blockchain. Right. So I think I don't know if that answered your question. You broke up a little bit.
It does. No, it does. All I was saying is we're going through some difficult times. Whether people have argued whether it's a bull or a bear market, people's opinions have changed wildly around that. Everyone got enthusiastic again. First, there was lots of FUD around the tariffs, and then there was, which there still is, of course, that really hasn't gone away, especially globally. And in the meantime, then when Bitcoin jumped back up, all the optimism kind of came right back. But it hasn't had the same knock-on effect to other altcoins. So people are suggesting, I'll go back over to Ken, that we are looking at a year of focusing on the fundamentals. Ken, do you think that that's true? And do you think that that means leaning more into Bitcoin? Or what do you see that, meaning? If we're looking for novel use cases, real technology, projects that have real value, probably would lose thousands and thousands and thousands of meme coins. But, trying to shift off the fat from the industry and just focus on what's core and what's novel. Do you think that that's going to lead into more Bitcoin related solutions? Or you said you were a Sol Maxi, tell me about it revolving around Sol if you want, man. It's your answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a Sol Maxi, but there's no doubt that BTC is still the king and everything. So price wise, then we already have this indicator called BTC dominance, right? So it is still like the king, and whenever BTC is going up and down, it's moving the whole market with it. So but on the product side, I think that because as Mike here, we are all building products, right? So from Saro's point of view, then we believe that as long as we are building something and it is like solving a problem and we are doing it really good, so eventually we'll be the last man standing. So I would say that I think that explains the question, because we are all sticking to the fundamentals, building things that actually works and it is creating values for the users and all of those in the market, and not only in the market but like for the mass adoption and the whole world. So I think that eventually those with good fundamentals, projects, tokens, for example, because sometimes the token price does not really comes along with the project's status. Sure. But I would say that eventually will be like the last man standing with good fundamentals, with good heart, and everything will be shifting into good value.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's true for Bitcoin projects specifically? Do you think that's going to play a larger role? In other words, I see macroeconomic conditions and social conditions, frankly, if you include wars and that sort of thing, that would really indicate like, hey, you're on, guys. I mean, 10 and 9 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was writing about Bitcoin, we talked about, times of economic hardship and social strain, globally being the opportunity for this kind of use case to really come to the fore as kind of a global solution. Are we there, Mike? What do you think? Is there enough going on in the world right now? We had a pandemic. We got past that. Now we've got some wars. Now we've got a huge trade war. There's an uncomfortable feeling out there. Are we next 5 years, are we entering a position where Bitcoin could really take its original projected role as sort of the global decentralized currency?
I think it's inevitable that Bitcoin has value that nothing else does. I feel it in my life all the time. Like when you go to the bank, you have to ask permission. Please, can I use my money, please? And they're, it's like, well, maybe you can today, or sure. And this is even in the U.S. Imagine in another country where it's much harder, much more difficult, or they inflate the currency like crazy. I mean, it's not just that, just carrying, traveling, it's hard to have access to money, and if you just remember your seed words or whatever, you have your money in your brain at any time. You can carry money across borders, and so it's Bitcoin has, and it's all there's a million other cases inflating the money, Bitcoin's locked. It has, so it's inevitable that Bitcoin will become more and more used, in my opinion, because I see the value, I use it, and I know others do. So I think it's something that is not going away and is only going to get more. In terms of price, I've been Bitcoin for 10 years, so it goes up a lot and it goes down a lot. So
sure. Price action is the least interesting part of a project to me, frankly. We talk about it for reference. We talk about it because it gauges public involvement, I suppose. But obviously Bitcoin has an extant value that will continue to have a use case that's appealing to people. How do you, so let's pursue that for another minute and go over to Ken. next 5 years, we're going with the idea that essentially, even though it becomes almost a matter of philosophy, essentially we will assume that mainstreaming is just here now, right? So what do the next 5 years look like to you? What do you want them to look like? What are you looking for, man?
That's a tough question because I'm not really like, that kind of visionary. But I would say that,
Well,
because
you just share your hopes, I suppose. It's okay. It's just a matter of opinion.
I would say like when we talk about fundamentals, right? So actually, like good projects, good network with good fundamentals, good heart from those team members gonna prevail. So I would say that in 5 years, everything gonna change, as long as there isn't kind of like black swan event, right? So like the pandemic or anything like that. So I would say that it is a point that I mentioned earlier. So in a few years, I think that all of the other chains gonna be neutralized, because everything will come down to like the trading volumes, and all of the use case will be like even out for the chains. And then when people talk about Bitcoin, then it is still the name that comes first, right? So scaling for Bitcoin is gonna be there. It is also like the concern for me is that it just went. But like for 5 years, I think that it will be there. The scaling demand for Bitcoin will be there, and let's see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. What role do you think decentralization will play in the overall scheme? I mean, the U.S. audience, the global audience in Web3 has shown a spotty relationship to decentralization. And if given, especially during bull markets, if given the opportunity between something being fast and cheap and being completely decentralized, decentralization has an abstract value that requires some thinking about it to really understand. How important is it going to stay? Or are we going to have all these normies come in from traditional finance by way of exposure to Bitcoin through ETFs that just don't even understand or give a crap about the ethos of what the crypto space was originally supposed to be about? How do you see it playing out, Ken?
I would say that decentralization is always the goal for everyone in the space, right? But for me personally, I think that it cannot be 100%. Like even because we are a citizen of the country, right? For example, like I'm in Asia, so sometimes then even when I'm cashing out for any kind of like expense of my own, then I still need to go to the bank, and I still need to obey to my country's monetary laws and everything. So I would say that decentralization will be there, but it will be in a certain areas. It could be in how people do things in the banking system, or how people do things in their daily transactional things. But like personally, I don't think that it can be 100%, like because it will involve a lot of downsides with it, along with the good sides, like for example money laundering and
Right.
other bad stuff as well. So but I think that mass adoption will be there, especially in the terms of decentralization, that it will be in certain areas. Yeah.
I'm going to ask the same kind of two questions, but in reverse order of you, Mike. Starting out with decentralization, there are a lot of drivers that make people forget about decentralization. In my experience, having watched the industry over the past 9 years or so, where if it's cheaper, if it's faster, if they're making money, people will start to get a lot more laissez-faire about decentralization. But I think that one of the things you run up against is that people fundamentally, and of course TradFi in general, or any human-based process, is sort of inherently not centralized. So where do you see, do you see decentralization winning out in the war of ideas, especially with more institutional influence and more traditional investors entering the space through ETFs, or or do you see it really staying central? How do you think that's going to go over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that decentralization will win out because it's the best solution, and I think it's the right solution. But I do think that there is a struggle, internal struggle. There's some people who want it to be centralized, to have control. So there will be those that try to do that. So we always have to be vigilant. But I think the Bitcoin community is good with that, like being vigilant to keep it as decentralized as possible and making that the main goal. There's also, it's easier sometimes when it's more centralized. So people will sometimes use that if they don't care as much about decentralization. But I think, decentralization, the Bitcoin ledger, having it decentralized is the first time in history that there's been that option, and that it's like a super needed, urgent option that was solved, like a problem that was solved and had never been solved. And so I'm just really thankful that we have the option. People have the option to have decentralized. So as long as we're vigilant and keep that in mind as the main goal, I think, and I do think the Bitcoin community is good at that. I think we'll be okay.
It's honestly good to talk to, it's good to talk to people who hold decentralization as a really core value and are pretty tapped into why it is important in our space. You see a lot of different variations of dedication to the main tenets of Bitcoin. What you call it, you're kind of passionate about, as you call it, like a necessary solution for our modern age. How would you describe that need that Bitcoin is fulfilling on a fundamental level by playing kind of its core role as a decentralized global currency?
I mean, the need is to be able to, for a person to be able to have control of their value by themselves and not have anyone else say what they can, have control over it. And it's a super urgent thing that, I mean, people are, it's not being able to have your own, store of value has caused so many problems throughout history. People have lost, everything. And being able to have control over that is super urgent and important. And, actually with our Spaces protocol, we argue that, another use case to this decentralization is naming. It's super urgent because names, like domain names, are taken down if people disagree with what's being said on there, or there's security risks. It's the same thing with banks. Like banks traditionally before, banks held your money and they could stop you, could debank you, whatever. Like they could take away your money if they didn't agree with what you say. And it's the same thing with naming. You can take down your website, you can take down your username from Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or YouTube if they don't agree with what you're saying. So there's an urgent need for this decentralization, a person to be able to own, to be self-sovereign and to have, that's something super urgent, and it's finally here, and it's a huge revolutionary invention by Satoshi. So being able to have self-sovereignty is the thing. And it's amazing that it's here for people to have. So I think it's, optimistic that we'll focus on that and keep trying to make it decentralized as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have a few more minutes before we're going to wrap it up. So we've got AI in the midst of changing everything. We've got quantum computing, although that's a sort of a nebulous phantom in a lot of ways. We were trying to guard against a thing that is as yet undefined. It seems like a dicey proposition to me. How do you think but AI is clearly going to impact everything. I mean, it already is. It's already impacting mining. It's already, like, any project that's not incorporating, or at least doesn't have AI somehow on their roadmap as a contributing part of their stack, probably needs to consider that. How do you think it's going to change the industry? How do you think these emergent technological areas will change the industry?
Yeah, so technically, like you mentioned, AI is already changing everything all around the world, not just our industry. So But I would say that personally, I also use AIs in many things, many tasks that I do every day. For example, like whenever I have some kind of ideas, I will ask the AI to actually generate, a plan or to do something, and then I adjust to my liking. So I would say that AI will makes your job really, really easier, and also it will comes with a challenge. Like everybody is using it, so what is the difference between project to project, between like one person to another? And I would say that it will, eventually comes down to whether the one who is using the AI is capable of putting his own thoughts into it. Like because for many things that the AI can generate, but like in order to adapt to a fast changing industry like we do right now, then I think that it takes a lot more than just information. It takes feels, it takes heart and many other things that alias can do. For example, like price prediction and everything. It doesn't really necessarily based on technical analysis only. It will comes down to many other things. Just sometimes it's just a feeling. So I would say that it will comes down to whether you are using the AIs correctly, efficiently, and as if you are putting your heart into it as well. And
Right.
and then also like it is also fundamentals. Like if you are doing it right, then you will be the winner.
All right. Well, definitely. I mean, certainly there's a lot of potential there. And I agree with you about that side. And I use it for daily tasks as well. I use it for researching for shows, among other things. I mean, it's great for structuring thoughts. But, going over to you, Mike, there are also some, like, I don't mean to get too like apocalyptic with my scenarios, but I was having this conversation. I remember talking to Space ID about it, for example, talking about digital identity. Unless we create a standardized way to track the doubtless tens of thousands of AI agents that will have the ability to trade crypto in 2025. I mean, I expect to see at least thousands of them, because everybody's going to be trying to compete. It's transactional. It's a way to make money. But what do you do when we get to a place where we've got second generation semi-autonomous AI agents that were created by other semi-autonomous AI agents? And what do we do when we get like 51% attacks from people, essentially mobbing with multiple bots that, as far as their digital wallets are concerned, are full-fledged members of the Web3 community? Justin can go spoof his identity 10,000 times if I apply this kind of scam at scale. How do we guard against that, man? What kind of guide rails do we need?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is another amazing invention that is going to just change everything, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen. I mean, if it becomes super intelligent, more intelligent than us, it's like, how can we even imagine what's going to happen? But yeah, I mean, like as you point out, I mean, it's so easy to replicate somebody's voice, video. Like you could easily pretend, spoof that you're somebody else, or like. That's why I think it's really important to have like proof, like cryptographic proof that you are the person. So I think that's something that we can help with Spaces protocol. It's like, if I am Mike at Bitcoin and I sign that this content is from me, and it's proved, but with math, and proof of work that I actually did this content, that's helpful to like at least stop that stuff. But I also think, like, if you're an AI agent, like, are you going to want to use dollars, like cash dollars, like that you get, or are you going to want to use Bitcoin? Like, right. It seems like a really good use case. Like, it seems like a natural fit. AI would use, Bitcoin or crypto for transactions and stuff. So I think that hopefully AI will have Bitcoin, best interest in mind, and want to also make it as secure as possible too. So.
Right. Well, I hope so. But you had mentioned sovereign identity, so I imagine you're into DID overall. Do you think that we need to apply a similar standard to AI agents if they're going to work on a semi-independent basis?
I think it's, yeah. I mean, I think having proof that it's you or an agent, that does it, is going to become more and more important, especially because you can't trust voice or video now. Or like, what can you trust? So, and you can't trust usernames on social networks because those can be easily, an employee could take that away, or the organization itself can take it away, or other users can try to get it banned in some way. So you can't trust usernames, you can't trust DNS, you can't trust domains, because hundreds of people have access to that domain name. Employees at registrars can take control of it. Registries can take control of it. I can. So you can't trust centralized things like that. So I think it's super important. It's one of the reasons why we created the Spaces protocol, is that's an urgent need for decentralized naming, so that you can prove that you're the person that creates that content, and it can't be taken away from you.
Right. Well, thank you so much to Mike and Ken for joining us today. And of course, to David, who had to drop off. And of course, to Spencer from the top of the hour from Fractal Bitcoin. It was great talking to him as well. This was a great discussion. I really appreciate you sharing your insights. And we'll talk to you guys again soon. Please come back. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Appreciate the time, guys.
Take care, guys. All right. So thank you, viewers at home. I think that was fascinating. Honestly, those were like three really powerfully intelligent guys who really care a lot about Bitcoin and about crypto in general. We need to bear in mind that, as Vitalik Buterin once said, really ideas are our most limited resources. And that's absolutely true. But humans are just innately curious creatures. For right or wrong, as we all know, if you look at history, if there is something that we can do, we will do it. So as much as I've asked over and over again, why should there be ordinals? Why should there be DeFi on Bitcoin? We all know what's going to happen. It isn't really a matter of why it should happen. We just all know that it's going to happen. There's going to be the demand. People are going to wonder how it would happen, even if it means they break the system or it's kind of bumpy along the ride. They're definitely going to get in on it and see what they could do, because everybody's trying to make it their own stake their own claim, make their own impression on the industry. And Bitcoin is a great place to start. I think, honestly, like after the show, after the conversations I've been having, that industry that focuses more closely on Bitcoin as kind of a central hub might not be a terrible idea. For one thing, people outside of our space understand its value, and it doesn't really change anything that we're doing with altcoins. What I'll be interested in seeing is if a win for Bitcoin can continue to rise all ships, as they're fond of saying, which it has done in the past, but not as much this go around. I guess particularly for Ethereum, there's kind of a decoupling, but not financial advice as always. But that might be partially because of the rising popularity of Solana, which is a more centralized exchange. The centralization argument is going to be a tricky one. It's hard to get people to accept solutions that are just better for them in an abstract way if it takes more than one sentence to explain why they're better off that way, right? It's hard to get people to do the right thing without an immediate incentive to do so. But maybe decentralization will win out, because Bitcoin and the respectability and the long-term value of Bitcoin will ultimately win out. That would be a good timeline for crypto overall, I think. So anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. You've been an important part of our community by participating, by watching the show. We thank you very much. As I say at the end of every show, if you get the opportunity, please decouple from your devices at some point today. In other words, try to get outside and get away from your connected devices. Don't be on your cell phone the entire time if you go for a walk or something. I have a golden retriever, which I think you heard bark earlier in the show, who's very helpful about making sure that I get outside at least a couple of times a day, which is good. It keeps me from sitting in my basement smoking and writing 12 hours a day. Anyway, folks, We love you. We'll talk to you soon. This is Justin from Blockheadz on RoxomTV, and we hope you come back and join us again. Peace, everyone. Take care.